Hi, I'm Mike Reynolds, a senior reporter covering the media industry with S&P Global Market Intelligence Tech, Media, and Telecom News Team. Welcome to MediaTalk, a podcast hosted by S&P Global, where the news and research staff explore issues in the evolving media landscape. Today, I'm joined by Scott Young, Group Senior Vice President of Content Production and Business Operation at Warner Bros. Discovery Sports Europe. Of late, Scott's been concerned with the little project known as the Summer Olympics from Paris. Warner Bros. Discovery is the rights holder across Europe for the games. How you doing today, Scott?
Thanks, Mike. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks. Scott is going to give us some insights on Warner Bros. Discovery's production, distribution, and a little bit about advertising plans for the Paris Olympics, the opening ceremony for which is July 26th, before the Summer Games conclude on August 11th. Let's get to it. Discovery's covered 3 Olympics, but the Paris Games are the first for the combined Warner Bros. Discovery. What does this mean for the company, Scott?
This means one of the most epic coverage of an Olympic Games ever seen by a broadcaster of our scale. And the meat on that bone means that we are going to show every moment of the Olympic Games live across our platforms. And those platforms include free-to-air, linear, subscription streaming across Discovery Plus and Max. I know we've launched Max across Europe. And of course, a high volume of content on our web app and social. The way we now look at the Olympic Games is to make it the most immersive experience that we possibly can for those that love the Olympic Games.
A lot of stuff, a lot of people. Scott, how many people do you have on the ground or will have on the ground in Paris? I'm assuming it's quite a bit more than might have been in Tokyo and Beijing, given the constraints of the pandemics on those 2 Olympics.
Yeah, the saying it takes a village to raise a project like this is very apt here. There's about 3,100 people that are working across this project globally, not just in any particular central market. And that includes teams of TNT Sports in Atlanta. Where we not only have teams working from Atlanta back in Paris, but also working in Atlanta in the editing suites, creating content overnight. So as we broadcast 3,800 hours of the games, we have around about 900 people on the ground in Paris. I want to say Paris broadly in France, because obviously it has the center of the venues, but there are a lot of venues around France, including down to Marseille, where there is sailing, and of course surfing in Tahiti, which is a venue that we haven't sent too many people to.
But a lot applied though for that one, right?
Everybody applied for that one. So we have a vast group of people, but the way that we run our organization is not to take everybody into a central point, but to use all of our key markets, including in Paris and the UK and Norway and Spain, Italy, Germany, and Poland. So each one of those key markets have a production base in that area. And then also we have a very large central team that services those markets in Paris. So the idea of a village being expanded around the world is very much how we manage Olympic Games.
Okay. You're going to reach how many nations with your coverage this time, Scott, and different languages and productions for different countries?
Yeah, so we have 47 markets as part of WBD Sports Europe, and Eurosport is the home of the Olympics. But very much what our Olympic Games production looks like these days really relies on the power of streaming. Our superpower as a sports broadcaster is streaming. And whether it's Max in most of the markets or Discovery Plus in 3 of the current markets, the fact that you can watch every moment of the games live at your discretion, whether it be traditional linear or whether it be streaming, the market number now almost becomes irrelevant because the power of watching the games is now portable. So we're talking about 47 markets in 19 languages as a very traditional way of broadcasting Eurosport across Europe. But the advent of our streaming platforms now means really it's very portable. And in those markets, you can choose any language anywhere you're traveling to. So it starts to expand out to quite a beast of a production service.
You guys still have sub-licensing agreements with different local broadcasters in the traditional linear mode?
Yeah, so the way the last 4 games has worked, including Paris, is that we acquire the rights to all of the games for all of the markets and then sub-license to traditionally the free-to-air broadcasters or public service broadcasters in those regions. That is usually part of the Broadcasting Act in those regions where the Olympics must be accessible to all. And we work quite closely as we see them as partners. So our sub-licensing team have either done deals for all 4 games, or we work through individual games depending on the market. But yeah, it's an important part of our business strategy of the Olympics in the current cycle. And as I said, we work with them hand in glove, because that is a far more successful way to operate as a content business, as well as being commercial partners.
Scott, can you talk about the opening ceremony? It's on the Seine. The athletes are going to be floating up a river on barges. 300,000 people, I think, will be lining the banks of the river. Can you give us a sense of what that's going to be like?
Let's tackle that in the order in which it was sent. The opening ceremony is going to be a remarkable sporting moment. And when I say that, to have an Olympic Games opened outside of a traditional arena will be a moment in time in itself. OBS, which is Olympic Broadcasting Services, that are doing the host broadcast feed of that, say that this is the largest broadcast of an opening ceremony or a sporting event in history. Some 130 cameras, 6 drones, 3 helicopters, 27 OB vans is what it will take to broadcast the athletes. So the river is 6 kilometers long, and the barges take about 42 minutes from start down to Trocadero. The athletes will get off at Trocadero, which is the festival arena that's just opposite the Eiffel Tower. The athletes will get off the boat and then be welcomed into a purpose-built stadium that's down opposite the Eiffel Tower, where President Macron and the IOC President Thomas Bach will then welcome the athletes into that arena, and the famous saying of "Let the games begin," of which they then light the torch. The opening ceremony was first pitched to us by the Paris 2024 committee as something they wanted to be as revolutionary. And I think they're on track to be not only revolutionary, but quite extraordinary. And I think if all goes according to plan, this will be a moment in time for everybody to remember, not just sports fans.
Yeah, there's never been anything like this, so we're all looking forward to that. In the U.S., Scott, the women's sports movement is full flight. Caitlin Clark, the basketball star, has had the spotlight on her for the past year. The IOC says that Paris will mark the first time that 50% of Olympic athletes will be women. As a company, Warner Bros. Discovery has been committed to presenting women's athletics for quite some time. Looking to increase that coverage in Paris, or what's your game plan there?
The game plan is, as it is for all of our sport, to make sure there is an even balance of men and women. And when I say that, not just in competition, because it is fantastic to see that of 10,500 athletes, there is a balance between men and women. Gender equality in that is really important to us. But in other sports, to make sure that things like prize money are equal as well. Right? So as far as the Olympics is concerned, for this moment in time over 2 weeks, it's brilliant that they've got there. And we will be celebrating that. We will be focused on that, and that will be very much part of our content. I think broadly, as part of a sports broadcast in the current community, making sure that there is gender equality and parity across sport with men and women is an absolute focus.
In terms of U.S. athletes, gymnast Simone Biles, swimmer Katie Ledecky, and the sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson, going to be a lot of spotlight put on them here in the States by NBCU. I'm sure you guys are covering them as well. What about from a European perspective, Scott? Who are some of the big women's stars that may emerge at these games?
One of the most notable for us is Dina Asher-Smith, who we do a lot of work with. She's a fantastic ambassador for the Olympics. She's a fantastic ambassador for women's sport. She works very closely with us, not just as an athlete, but as someone who is very articulate about where sport is going in the current era. We will pay close attention to all athletes from all nations. But as I said before, we've got 47 of our own nations as part of our ecosystem of broadcasting. So we have quite a slate of athletes that we'll want to make sure that we surface and celebrate. But no matter where they're from, the great thing about the Olympic Games is that you never know where that remarkable story is about to appear. And in the numerous sports across the numerous venues, our strategy is to make sure we are part of telling the story of those athletes, which means we have reporters, journalists, and producers in every venue, because you just never know where that moment appears. And we want to make sure we surface that and share that with our fans.
That makes total sense. Speaking of dollars and cents, Scott, can you talk a little bit about advertising for the games?
So we obviously work with the top partners, which is very much part of the agenda, and working with the IOC. The sales team, the commercial team are smashing their targets, which they're really pleased about. And that is something that in the current climate of commercial linear television, that takes quite a bit of work to make sure that we achieve that. Delighted for the sales team that have been able to manage to procure that. This Summer Olympic Games is a moment in time that everybody wants to be a part of. We have long-standing partnerships with clients such as Bridgestone that continue to return, because we not only tell the story of the athletes that they support, but also of their involvement and how that is very relevant. So really pleased to say that commercially, from a sales perspective, it's looking really positive.
Good deal. Good deal. What about, let's talk a little bit about viewership. I'm going through a checklist here, scorecard, if you will. For the Tokyo Olympics, I think there were more than 372 million people in Europe watch the summer game through Discovery channels and platforms and the various sub-licensing partners. For the Beijing Games, Discovery Plus and Eurosport streamed about 1 billion hours. All told, I think 156 million people watched the 2022 Winter Games. Scott, what are you looking at this time around? The venue, the Summer Olympics, the pandemic is presumably in our past. I would imagine viewership's going to go through the roof.
We hope so. And not just viewership. I think for us these days, we measure audience in many different ways. So in the traditional linear sense, yes, we're looking for those big numbers of viewers that come to watch those tentpole moments in the Olympics. So the athletics is always one of those events, men's and women's 100-meter finals, always drag in a fantastic crowd. But any of those gold medal events are hallmark moments where people come to traditional television. We're also looking for a significant growth in subscription across our streaming platforms. And by offering every moment of the Olympic Games live across Max and Discovery Plus, we're very confident we're going to grow an audience that realizes that not only can they come and curate the experience of the Olympic Games at their own discretion, at their own time and place, because there's very portable content as well, but they start to share that with their friends and family. So then we start to see content across their web app and social platforms really grow, which is the third tentpole of assessment, which is engagement. And having an audience that's highly engaged in our content, sharing our content and talking to their friends and family about what we are broadcasting is really part of that trifecta. So strong linear audience, really engaged audience in our content, and high number of subscribers coming to Max and staying is very much how we'll be measuring success.
All right. Warner Brothers Discovery struck a global licensing agreement with the IOC for Looney Tunes characters, Daffy Duck, Wile E. Coyote, and Tweety Bird to be part of official Olympic licensed products. You also have different clothes, toys, collectibles, and other products for different nations, including the U.S. I have to think that this is a first for the games this way, in terms of a big company like yours getting involved with a franchise that many people love globally.
It's the start of putting very popular, well-known, much-loved characters alongside something as popular as Summer Olympic Games. And I think this is just the beginning of many of those fantastic brands that we hold within Warner Brothers Discovery that can align to something as scalable as the Olympic Games. And as not just the characters you read out, you'll see Bugs Bunny start to appear not only as a Looney Tunes character, but a member of our reporting team.
Okay.
As we're about to release fairly soon. So we're about to expand the Looney Tunes characters' involvement in our Olympic broadcasting like no one has ever seen before, which we're very much looking forward to. So look, I think there's lots of different ways, and whether it's Looney Tunes or whether it's any number of our very successful tentpole traditional entertainment portfolio brands, I think we can start to see more ways in engaging. And of course, in 4 years' time, we're back in Los Angeles with the Olympic Games, where Looney Tunes is only the start.
Okay. In January of last year, Warner Brothers Discovery inked an IOC rights deal along with the European Broadcast Union for the next 4 Olympics. I guess this works for the company. You guys are making money, Scott. Warner Brothers Discovery likes the Olympics.
We love the Olympics. Those 5 rings are very symbolic, not just as a sporting event, but as a cultural event. To be a global sports broadcaster, as we are, I think the Olympic Games are a very important part of what we do. And even though the region in which we broadcast the Olympics is across Europe, it's very important for us globally as part of our brands as a sports broadcaster. I think our long-term plan going forward between now and 2032 is, what is the story of the Olympics? What is the trajectory of the Olympics going to be between now and 2032? What does that matter for the Olympians? to be an athlete in Brisbane 32 feels like a long way away from today. And it feels like it could be a very different experience. And if you just see in the Paris Games the last 2 days, we've got breaking as a sport for the very first time. Where do you start to see the Olympics go and how it drags in a new audience, a new cultural audience, and that mix between artistry and athleticism, which is where we're starting to see that intersection now with things like breaking, but also 3-on-3 basketball and skate and even speed climbing. We're starting to see some very non-traditional sports break through in the Olympics, which I think is going to be a very important part of their success going forward. And that very much bodes well for us as part of our content.
Getting to the end here, Scott, obviously you're going to be busy. Will you have a time to get out there and check out some of the events in person? And if you have that opportunity, what do you want to see?
As an Australian, I would say swimming is usually my default as a fantastic Olympic sport, usually because we're quite good at it. But I look forward to just being out in Paris and seeing an Olympic Games that is no longer constricted by COVID, that is in a European summer in quite an extraordinary city with some amazing venues next to amazing landmarks. The beginning of the Olympics is always a bit hectic, where we just make sure that everything is going according to plan, and then you take a breath. And yeah, I do hope that we get out and not just me, but much of my team get a moment to experience the Olympics, because it's not just a moment in time for the athletes. It's very much a moment in time for all of us at Warner Brothers Discovery to be able to be involved in such a remarkable event like the Olympic Games, but not only that, the Olympic Games in Paris. I think right now, the world needs the Olympic Games. So what I'm really hoping is not just for fantastic competition with remarkable moments, with athletes achieving their dreams after years and years of dedication and training and sacrifice, but also just that celebration that the Summer Olympic Games always brings, where it just makes people stop for a minute and smile and enjoy time. And as I said, I think the Olympic Games has a lot to offer the world right now, and I'm really looking forward to that opening ceremony on the 26th of July, where an estimated 3.5 or 4 billion people will be watching. So if half the world's population have a moment in time to celebrate athletes going down the River Seine to do something remarkable, I think that's going to be a lot more than just the opening of a sporting event.
Okay. That concludes this episode of Media Talk. I wanted to thank our guest, Scott Young, Group Senior Vice President of Content Production and Business Operations at Warner Bros. Discovery Sports Europe, for being our virtual tour guide for the company's vast and complex presentation plans for the upcoming Paris Games. Thank you, Scott.
Absolute pleasure.
This is Mike Reynolds. Whether you're watching in Europe or in the U.S., enjoy the Olympics. We'll catch up on the next episode of Media Talk.